Today we welcome Tony Erickson to Rev-n-u Unplugged. Tony is a senior partner for SBI Growth Advisory. He is an accomplished tech executive turned growth advisor with 2 decades leading and scaling global enterprise businesses. Now, Tony is focused on helping CEOs, CROs, and boards accelerate growth by blending big company discipline with private equity precision. Tony brings incredible insight to this episode, leaning on his experience as a seller, sales leader, and now top advisor. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, Tony, welcome to Rev-n-u Unplugged. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for giving up your time. And I'm excited to hear some of the content and insight that you bring to our audience today. As a way of getting started, Tony, it'd be great if you could just allow those that don't know you some insight into who you are and how you've come to be where you are today.
Yeah. No, James, look, I appreciate it. I appreciate you inviting me to the podcast. It was a pleasure to get introduced via our mutual friend, JD Miller, and to join you on the show. So my name's Tony Erickson, and I am a senior partner at SBI Growth Advisory. And SBI is a company that focuses solely on helping other companies make their numbers and achieve their growth objectives. So that is all we do all the time. Our job is to sell services to people to help them better sell their goods and services. And we focus on B2B companies who focus on enterprise clients. And we work with a lot of private equity backed companies, a lot of tech companies, but we definitely work with a lot of public companies, even outside of the tech space as well. So we run quite the gamut of companies that we work with to help them achieve growth objectives. And one of the things I like to explain to people is since the dawn of time, when man went from a barter system to some form of currency, people have been wanting more of it. So growth is the never ending thing that people are chasing, which is where we spend all of our waking moments and some of our sleeping moments trying to help our clients achieve that objective.
Love it. And when I wanted to launch this podcast and was talking to JD about wanting to bring guests on the show that have a depth of experience in go-to-market, particularly in around that private equity space, that you were the top name on the list of people that he recommended that we should have on the show. You are talking to daily different CROs, CEOs, private equity businesses. So you have probably got quite a good handle on what's going on out there and where you can share some advice and guidance. And we've got some great topics that we're going to go into discussing now. And the first one that you mentioned is new logo acquisition, which I think is a fantastic topic because it covers an array of things. And it's also something that nearly every business wants to get better at. Before we dive into the particular, probably rolls into the same thing. Why did you choose this out of everything that you could choose? Why was new logo acquisition top of your list of topics to talk about?
Yeah, when we were prepping for this, the reason that I figured we should click into this is because this is what's causing people to have discussions with SBI right now. So, I mean, it is top of mind, and it's cyclical, right? A few years ago, it was all about protecting the base and protecting your clients and, expansion. And people got pretty good at doing that. And now it's turned into more of a new logo game because cost is a big challenge. So there's a lot, especially in the tech space right now, where people are questioning every single piece of technology within their company. And do they really need it? Does it actually have the ROI? So that's causing people to relook at things. It's causing clients to churn. And in a world where, NRR and GRR rates do tend to be under pressure right now, new logo is the cure-all. And new logos are really hard. When we're working with companies, if someone says, we have an expansion problem and we need to, take our 27 products and our Pareto says that, 97% of our clients only own one of our products and we can go sell them the other 26. I'm like, that's a great and solvable problem. You're hunting in the zoo. But in the world of, new logo, you got to go hunt in the wild. And it's really hard. And it takes a different type of individual, a different skill set, a different motion, different set of enablement, a different, mindset to go drive new logos. And it's really hard. So in a time, again, where retention rates are under pressure, new logos become a priority.
It's interesting because you mentioned the circle of where things go, retention, land and expand, and then it comes back to the new logo aspect. And it's really interesting how a new logo can drop off, because new logo is what, in essence, builds a company to be in anything and to winning business. So any CROs that are sitting down planning for 2026, they know that new logo is really important. Particularly, like, it has never been so hard to sign new technology deals in recent times. And if you're reliant on your client base that they're going to sign up more, then you're leaving yourself open to leaving money on the table and sometimes not doing deals out of your power because the companies just don't have the spend to do it, or they'll choose to spend it elsewhere. So what should a CRO that has been largely land and expand, but needs to have new logos, wins, growth in 2026, what would your advice be them to be thinking about right now that can have them ready to go?
One of the biggest challenges that we see people when they're thinking about a shift is, what kind of a model are they going to put in place? And are they willing to commit to a model, or are they going to have a handful of different hybrid models all trying to work in unison? And whether you choose to go with a hunter farmer motion, whether you choose to go with a stratified, small, medium, large account motion, whether you choose to go with a SME based model, a geo model, any of those work. What doesn't work is when you try to put together 5 different structures and expect it to all work when there's no real strategy around how you want to go to market. And inevitably, organizations will have people who are really adept and skew towards hunting and new logo motions. They are great at building relationships and bringing new clients into the company, but they tend to be really bad at managing ongoing relationships. So, that's where you've got to identify the right talents and the right skill sets and put them in the right performance conditions to play to their strengths. And some companies need to embrace a more hybrid model where they have people managing an existing set of business as well as a new logo set of business, because perhaps they're going to be more vertically oriented. So I need someone focusing on the energy industry, managing my Chevrons of the world, but also out there hunting and finding the pioneers and the other companies of the world where we need to be thinking about bringing domain expertise. But if you have a more generic product, I would say a more horizontal product rather than a vertical product. And, we're talking in the tech private equity space because that's where you play. That's where we play a lot. So let's orient this conversation there. If we have something that's more of a horizontal, like an IT service management type tool or some sort of an IT infrastructure kind of tool, then you can go with more of a geographic based model and you can go with more of a quote patch of dirt. However you choose to do it, the key is focus. We see far too many companies loading up their sales reps with hundreds of accounts, and most of them go untouched throughout the course of a year. It feels counterintuitive to give your strategic reps 10 to 20 accounts or your enterprise reps 30 to 50 accounts. But if you actually want to see success, you've got to create focus and you've got to properly segment your market, understand where the addressable market is, the potential within that market, the scoring of all the accounts within that market, and then focus your people there. And you've got to stay away from the distractions, the small companies, the small deals, the people who will take your call because no one else is calling on. You need to go after the places where it requires competition, and then you got to be real good at the competition, at defeating the competition. But all that requires focus. And that is the thing we see far too often this time of year. People are like, how am I going to refocus my efforts going into 2026 versus just doing it the same way over again and hoping we get a different set of results?
It is. And I totally echo what you say there, where people have a plan, but it's trying to cover everything. And you suddenly can only be average at everything and not a master at one particular effort. You mentioned looking at particular segmentation and choosing whether it's hunter farmer. How would you recommend a CRO that's looking at it who was actually thinking, look, we're just going to try a bit of everything, and then we'll pull on the string of the one that works really, really well. There's no rhyme or reason as to why that one worked really, really well, but we'll just do that. But how would you recommend how a CRO would sit there and actually go, right, this fits? Because I imagine it comes against industry, size of business, talent probably comes into it as well. But how should they work out which tactic they should be implementing and focusing in on?
So when we help clients go through this decision process, the first thing you got to do is you got to align on your fact base. We got to understand what are the average number of deals that any rep or territory or sub-vertical or geo or theater is doing in any given year. What are the win rates? What are the ASPs? What are the, first sale versus second versus third? What do the renewal motions look like? Once we have that fact base, then we need to figure out which lever to pull. I mean, it's real easy to do math and say, well, if we just increased our deal count by 7% and we just increased our ASP by 5% and we just had 10% more opportunities in the pipeline, then you can make that look really interesting on a spreadsheet. But it's really hard to do all those three things at the same time. I mean, if you want to increase your ASP, why are your clients going to be willing to pay more? Is the value of the product actually there? And it probably is. But more often than not, people on the front line are unable to articulate the value of the product. They're unable to anticipate the objections and properly position the value prop. So that's where you've got to think about, how do I enable those reps? Oftentimes, one of the things that we will see when we actually diagnose a company's situation is we'll see a barbell instead of a bell curve of seller attainment. You end up with a whole lot of people who are never making it. You end up with a whole lot of people who are well beyond 100 or 150%. And then when you overlay tenure with that, what you realize is most of the people never get to the other side of ramping, which often takes 18, 24, 36 months, depending on the complexity of your product. And that is one of the challenges, getting people to a tenured position where they can actually be successful. That's one of the many things that we see. So I know we covered a lot, but I think the key there is when you're thinking about making this move, facts matter. Establishing a fact base, having a data-driven decision process is what matters. It's great to have opinions, but if you don't have the facts to back up the rationale, you won't have the buy-in of the organization to the plan you're trying to roll out. So you got to have a strong fact base, then you got to have a strong communication strategy to get buy-in, because when you restructure and change the go-to-market model of any given company, you can't do it to the organization. You have to do it with the organization. Otherwise, it ends up typically getting organ rejected, and you end up with the "this too shall pass" mentality amongst the front line.
Here's a how long's a piece of string question for you to give your best answer to. Largely in the private equity world, you're dealing with enterprise clients. You yourself probably done some of the largest deals in software sales. How easy is it to show that the business has moved forward, where most of these deals can take anywhere between 12, 18, 24 months to go from lead to being closed out? And if you're starting to put a focus on new business logos now, how likely are you to see a successful rate of new businesses won in 2026? And how do you message to the board, communicate to the board that it's not necessarily results, it's performance that we're looking for in 2026, and we might see the results of that in 2027? Or do you think they should be able to get some new logos in 2026?
It all comes down to the nature of the product itself. And, if your product is still a legacy product that is in more of an on-prem solution, and there are still many of those, and it's not a cloud or it's not a multi-tenant cloud solution, you've got to be realistic. If you're restructuring your revenue profile, moving from more of a traditional license model or a perpetual model into a true SaaS model that has a different cost structure associated with it, That is going to take time. And you have to be very communicative in what that plan looks like. And you've got to set a reasonable plan. So if you're going to go through a reshaping of your revenue profile, because you're trying to shift from more of a one-time model into an annuity model, you've got to be realistic in what that curve, what that J curve looks. Second thing that we'll often see is an over reliance on professional services that is augmenting revenue for the company. And software companies will often say they don't want to be in the professional services business, but they also like the top line revenue that it generates. So there's always a bit of a quandary there in terms of how do we want to look at that? How much focus do we want to put on it? When do we want to employ a partner strategy or something else? The other piece, though, that I think is key is when when you boil it all down, and you're thinking about something that could be a 12 to 24-month evolution that your company has to go through, it's all about what are you going to measure along the way? Because to your point, the bookings are the lagging indicator. I mean, that will be the success that you see 5, 6 quarters from now, if that's your typical sales length. And you have to understand what that sales length is, and your most recent past is the best predictor of future results. So if your average sales cycle is 276 days, do not build a plan that you think you're going to be able to chop it down to 137 days. That is unrealistic, and you need to bring facts to the equation and make sure your plan is set appropriately. And if you're going to be changing your product or your offering or your service, you can expect that to elongate rather than to shorten in the near term. So from a lagging indicator perspective, that will be the most frustrating thing you can be looking at, which is why you've got to establish not only leading, which are, the easier, more pipeline oriented things, but you got to get into the behavioral side of things. What are the behaviors that we want to be seeing? How many conversations are we getting into? How many impressions are we making? What does our top of funnel look like? If I'm a sales leader, how am I working hand in glove with my marketing leader to understand a true full funnel of the company? And what are we doing to make a market impression? How well are our campaigns performing? How many touches does it take for someone to actually engage into a legitimate opportunity? I mean, you know, 5, 10 years ago, we used to say it would take 7 to 9 impressions before something became, you know, qualified within our pipeline or even active within our pipeline. Those numbers now are in the teens or even beyond because of the amount of research at everyone's fingertips. So you got to think about that buyer journey and be realistic, but you've got to be able to measure it. Those behavioral indicators are going to be what you need to be communicating to your board to show that the plan is working. So if you can't baseline them and if you can't measure them, it's going to be really tough to say whether or not you're on track. And that's where you end up with this challenge, which sometimes I will describe it as we don't know where we're going, but we're making great time. That's not where you want to be.
How and when would you communicate with the board with your experience from working with so many different PE firms and people, the investors within those PE firms? What information should you be providing them with, and how regularly should you be doing it? Because I think one of the things I'm starting to see and learn from this is that I don't think CROs communicate enough with what's going on. They tend to think we'll just get deals done, we'll just work pedal harder, faster, and see if we can make something happen. So when you're trying to do such a seismic shift, which they are, what should they be telling the board, and how regularly should they be updating the board?
So at a minimum, they need to be doing the quarterly board update of some sort. And oftentimes those are virtual, maybe a couple of times a year virtual, a couple of times a year in person. That's table stakes. And there's typically a pretty standard board package that people expect to be communicating, and a structure and a format. It's the what you do in between, right? So a lot of boards in private equity in particular employ operating partners. And the reason that they do that is because those operating partners have pattern recognition. They've seen this story before. They can bring that advice to the operators of the business. The ones who leverage those operating partners and get their fingerprints on it and engage them to look at the problem and how it's being solved, that's the board meeting is the formality. what you do in between the board meeting to pull them in to make sure that you're getting their buy-in and get introductions to the people that they've seen solve this problem before. That's where you've got to be really focused. So the great CROs are really, really strong at managing the operating partners on their board, the independent board members, and seeking that advice in between the board meetings rather than showing up with a ta-da moment and, showing the results that may or may not be there. It's great if the results are there, but if you are going through change and expecting any kind of turmoil or bumpy results along the way, bad news does not get better with age. You need to be communicating it early and often and getting people's fingerprints on the problem and soliciting advice.
Yeah, I mean, both you and I have been in and around go-to-market and sales for long enough that we know that it's never a smooth ride. It's always bumpy. It always has ups and downs. You get more no's than you get yeses. And from what I see, if you do work with if you work with these operating partners, but if you're getting that information to the board, then one, it does obviously soften the blow. The longer you know that something's not gone how you want it, the more comfortable you feel with it. But then I feel the board meetings are better conversations about how we can overcome challenges, how we can move forward, rather than spending a lot of time trying to understand why it is where it is first and having to go through a lot of explanations through that. And I just think you can have a better board meeting if you just stand by and just communicate everything through the operating partner, because also the operating partner can whisper it into the investor's ear, and it's a much more softer landing. But I think anybody who thinks, particularly if you go in as a CRO into a private equity run business, the chances are you're going in because the ship needs to be rectified. There's something not quite right with it. It's hardly ever that a CRO will go into a all singing, all dancing, all you got to do is just turn up and count the bookings. But I think we just lose that bit of communication. You wanted to highlight churn and retainment in and around this, because I think it's obviously vitally important. If you're going out winning new logos, but you're losing clients at the same rate, you almost stand still. But why was churn or retaining clients there when talking about new logos? Where does it, in your mind, come together, and what's the challenge?
The challenge that we're seeing right now is, as everything has moved into cloud environments, switching cost is no longer the barrier that it used to be. So when you had stuff installed in an on-prem environment, sitting in a data center that you owned, or even if you outsourced it, it was difficult to go through the process of changing out a technology that's pretty core to your business. Think about what it used to take to replace an ERP. Think about what it used to take to replace a customer system that managed all of the billings and managed all of the customer interactions. Those are much less difficult now to replace than they used to be. I mean, there's some pain involved, but no longer are the days of 24-month implementations of large scale systems that, in much of the enterprise market. Now, in financial services and in travel and transportation, are there still some large monolithic systems that take months and years? Absolutely, there are. But for the vast majority of Fortune 1000 companies, switching costs for the technology that's out there today, if your technology is not great and continually being invested in and justifying your 3 to 5% annual price increase, because that's what they're often putting in place in addition to CPI or COLA, then they'll replace it. And it's pretty easy to do that. They're constantly out there getting prospected by your competition, even if you're installed. And that's the big challenge right now, is that there's no longer the barrier to switch that we all used to enjoy that kept technology really sticky. Now it's what's the flavor of the day? And that's why we see a lot of smaller companies now offering the same solution, and people have options. So it makes retention more difficult.
I remember having conversations with CIOs where they're saying they know their tenure in an organization. They said it's just not worth making a decision on some of that big tech to make the change, because they'll never see the value of it, and the pain of changing that tech will just eat into their tenure within that business. And that was their reason for not looking to switch out. Even if there was technology that was infinitely better, if this technology wasn't broken, we're not going to fix it. Now, at a touch of a button, you can be in and out. So how, with businesses now, in 2026, we know there's going to be a big focus on new logos. There has to be. But what should people be doing on the churn side just to keep their eyes on that and protecting the business that they've already won, right? Because the hardest part is winning it. But you drop the ball if you lose it. So what would be a couple of key things that you think CROs should be looking at to make sure that they try their best to retain and prevent a churn?
One of the things I think they have to look at is far too often we see every interaction with an existing customer being a sales call for the next product, the next feature, the next application. And that's important. But if every time your existing client talks to you, they feel like they're being sold to, that's not a great experience. I mean, at some point, it's like, I just want what I bought to work and work well. And oftentimes we see those QBRs being used as, sales meetings. And people have to be really cautious of that because nothing sells better than delivering great results. And if your product is delivering the results, if it's got the right interface, if it's got the right user experience, if it's generating the expected ROI, then you don't even have to ask for more business. They'll want to give it to you. So if you go all the way back to the initial sale and the value prop that you were putting on the table, how often is your team revisiting that? How much do you know about, are they actually achieving that? Because those people can become your advocates in an advocate marketing motion and help you drive new logos, as well as they become some of your stickiest clients and they want to buy more of your products. But again, that's one of the common missteps that we see is people often over-rotate to trying to sell the renewal from the day after they signed the first deal or trying to upsell in day one in a land and expand motion. And sometimes we lose sight of providing the expected service versus making sure the renewal got done.
We've seen the uprise of this customer success position. Where's your feeling on, we've seen a big drive in these customer success people being targeted on revenue, and suddenly they just become salespeople. Do you see that as the right motion, that customer success people should carry a revenue target, or does that defeat the object of what their role actually should be?
That is a difficult question to have a strong point of view one way or another, because it comes down to the nature of your product and how difficult it is to use or how much support it really needs. There's two camps for customer success. One is, we want our customer success team to drive advocacy and usage and adoption. And then the other is we want them to manage revenue and expand and capture price increase and maintain our renewal rates. The challenge is if we've got them just doing the advocacy and the adoption, they go under a microscope as an unnecessary cost. So now it's an area that often gets cut. On the flip side, if you turn them into just revenue, then how does that differ from the account executive managing the account? So I think that's where you've got to be thoughtful and pick one or the other, and that's where we see oftentimes many companies blur the lines on that and not call a play one way or another. And if you're going to call a play and have them be advocates, then understand that there's a cost associated with it, fund it properly, and provide the level of service that your clients expect. Then ask your clients whether or not they're getting that service and whether or not they're getting the value out of it. And if they're not, then you can rethink the motion. Likewise, on the revenue side, if you're going to make them all funded revenue, then is that a duplicative cost to the rest of your sales organization? One of the things I struggle with is when people have a hunting motion and then they've got an account executive motion for after the sale, and then they've got a renewal motion, and then they've got a CS. That's a lot of duplicate effort. How do you go about defining the rules and responsibilities and the rules of engagement in the swim lanes? Because if you don't have clarity amongst those four generic roles, I guarantee you have a lot of duplicate cost. And right now, boards are expecting productivity. I mean, we haven't even touched on AI in this conversation yet. And right now, everyone is looking at AI and doing pilots in AI. And in 2025, by and large, it has not resulted in direct savings that can be quantified and measured at the board level. That will change in 2026. People have been doing enough piloting, doing enough testing, and they're going to expect productivity to be realized within 2026 and expect more productivity and more efficiency out of their commercial organizations. So if you've got that kind of a structure and you've got a lot of duplicate effort throughout your organization, you need to be looking at where you can consolidate and where you can leverage technology to do duplicative roles or even augment roles that are more transactional in nature.
Well, you've kind of segued right into where my next question was going to be, which was around where does AI fit into this? Because people are using it as a cost cutting measure. The client's been won. Does it need a human? Because eventually the biggest cost involved in that is the employee who's having to do the touch points. Where do you see in 2026 AI coming into play, and where should CROs be careful not to go too far?
AI, the most powerful thing about AI is it gets you to the answer faster, but it can't solve the problem. That's one of the things that we're seeing. So we have an AI platform called WayForge that we had purchased that was specifically built for go to market. And it is more of an orchestrator of AI because, you know, call recording tools have AI built into them. Your forecasting tools have AI built into them. Your CRM instances have AI built into them. Your marketing tools have AI built into them. But how you orchestrate all of that and build agentic solutions and manage the agentic solutions that live within those and turn them into predictive AI solutions requires a level of orchestration that doesn't really exist out there today. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on. Because to your point, that's going to be table stakes going forward. If we're going to make these investments into AI, it needs to drive tangible results that we can see on the balance sheet. However, one of the challenges with AI, and you've probably seen all of the research on this, is it still hallucinates. AI is a great tool to get you to diagnose a problem. But again, humans fix problems. AI doesn't fix problems. AI streamlines processes. AI identifies gaps in processes. AI identifies the data that is inconsistent, but it still takes human intuition to connect the dots and make change happen within an organization. So some of the stuff that we've been using AI for example, is we will look at the talent of an organization and understand their competencies, their behaviors, and kind of the characteristics that they display based on role type. Then we'll correlate that to what we see in CRM data and how they pursue opportunities and how it goes through stages, and actually use AI to truly understand the digital behavior of a specific seller. Then we actually overlay that and even look at call recording tools and get into the transcripts and start to understand, when I look at the transcripts and I understand that in the first call, they're already talking about discounting, using the word discounting. And I look at the CRM record and I understand that it's quickly going to a below acceptable rate that is not what we want from the deal desk that we're running. Now I can start to pinpoint the problem, but I can't fix that. I just know the problem's there. So now I still need to go properly enable that person. I still need to give them better collateral. I need to give them better content. I need to give them better understanding of the product. I need to give them confidence so that they can go into those next conversations and not race to the bottom on price to try to win, but sell on value so that we can actually articulate the value of the product. And we're not having a discounting conversation. Rather, we're having an ROI discussion. So those are examples of how AI is going to fundamentally transform us. But at the end of the day, AI is going to put heat and light on the problem. What are we going to do with it is going to be the real question.
Love it. And I guess this time next year, we'll start to get an unfolding of what that exactly is and how people are handling that. We've just got one more topic to go, particularly around tech spend being cut. But before we do that, this is the opportunity where you get to ask me the one question that you've always wanted to ask a recruitment consultant. So it's a chance to put me on the spot for one time only. Don't miss this opportunity.
So, I've been thinking about this since you posed this, and I wanted to tie it back to a little bit about, sales leadership and thinking about the role of a recruiter. I was like, you've got to manage two pipelines and then marry them together. You need a pipeline of people who want to hire the candidates that and then you've got to nurture a whole group of people, and then you're playing matchmaker. So it's like you've got these two pipelines that you're constantly managing, and then you're looking for correlations to make introductions. So how do you actually manage that? Because it's almost like you've got two systems that need to come together. So when you put your sales hat on as a recruiter, how do you forecast your business? Because just because you got a lot of demand doesn't mean you got a lot of people, or just because you got a lot of people doesn't mean you got a lot of demand. How do you balance that and predict the future of your business?
So you can't really. The only way that you can really predict in recruitment is if you have contractors, not permanent. And very similar to the SaaS world, you can work out how many runners a business has. So runners as in contractors, and then how many do you have and how many projects are likely to come off. So, and you can go and find when other contractors that don't belong to you are going to finish. You could go in and maybe say, right, I can replace that contract. So on our contract side, you can predict a certain amount of growth of what we would call runners. On the perm side, it's really difficult. And so what you have to work on is very, very similar to the world of SaaS. Is there's behaviors you have to do, actions and performance that you need to do, which enables you to be able to win opportunities. And we'll know how many touch points that you need to have and the actions that you need to do that will help us to win opportunities. And it basically means you cannot rely on, particularly when you're niche like we are, we place sales leaders. So, there's only one CRO. So once you've placed with that business, you're hoping you're not doing anything else with that business for another 3 years. Otherwise, something's gone wrong with the person that you've placed. So what you have to do is networking. It's about talking to everybody. Do need to have other people doing the work for you. So it's people that are willing to put your name in a hat, because you can't talk to everybody. You need to arrive when there is a challenge that's going on, and you can't always pick the phone up at the right time. And the other side is, the candidates are the same as clients, and it's just talking to people all the time. So, my days are I probably speak to, if I haven't gone into London, I probably speak to 5 or 6 CROs a day. Some of them will be looking for opportunities, so we're chatting to them. Others will be talking about hiring, or maybe they want to be introduced to somebody within the network because they've got a particular challenge that they are wanting to solve. So it is basically about trying to get as many plates up spinning, and then the rest of my time is keep those plates spinning as much as you possibly can so that you can work through it. But I would love to sit here and say that I can predict where the deals are and how much we're going to do, but you just can't. Because the other thing, I used to say to people, like, how does it compare to like software sales or where you're selling an object? So the problem in recruitment is when there's an interview taking place, you've got two people who've got emotions and feelings, and you've got no control over that. You're not involved in that room, that screen, that meeting, so you can't control what gets said and how it gets said. But also, when you look at software, when you have a CEO or a CTO that finally says, "Yeah, we'll take it," imagine trying to convince the software that that's the company that you need to go and join, and it's going to be good, and they're going to use you to everything that you need. And that's where recruitment is. You've got two people that have feelings, they have emotions, and there's only so much that you can do. So it is about having as many plates up in the air as you can, and really, really getting to know and understanding people. The more you know and understand, the more you can help people make the right decisions. And don't be transactional, because that becomes hard, and then you're just trying to push people into the wrong opportunity. So it basically is networking, talking to all the right people as much as you can, and then being able to find the right people, and then people will tend to talk and spread the word. So it's not easy, but nothing's easy, is it?
Well, nothing's easy. And the reason I was thinking about it is because, we've seen so many businesses move to more of an annuity model. And for recruiting at a senior level to move into an annuity model, there needs to be a lot of replacement, which is the antithesis of what you want. Because to your point, when you place someone, you want them to work out, you want them to stick, you want them to be there for some time. Because I was talking with my wife last night, and we were talking about how everything is turning into as a service. I mean, whether it's blatant or not, take something as simple as snow skiing, which I love to do. And, if you walk up to a mountain right now in the US, it could cost you $250, $300 now to just go buy a day pass that used to cost $50. And they don't want you doing that. They want predictable revenue. They want you to spend $700 to buy a season pass that is the equivalent of walking up to the counter 2.3 days a year. They don't want you coming there anymore. They want predictability. And, in the world of recruiting, predictability has to be like the elusive thing that it's like, how do we become predictable? We don't know. I mean, there's going to be new startups. There's going to be people, changing jobs. Like, it's really hard to predict because it's so much dependent on macroeconomic factors and things well out of your control.
It totally is. I mean, you have seen some businesses that have gone in and been embedded, and that can kind of help with that because they end up doing things cheaper, but you're someone on site, there's a monthly spend. But then again, it becomes a challenge because there's so many ways that you can do recruitment, and it's never been easier to start a recruitment business up from your bedroom. The one thing that frustrates me about recruitment is there's no barrier for entry. It should be regulated because that would help me out so much.
Regulatory body for recruiting. I don't
Yeah.
know that, man. I don't know you're going to get a lot of uptake and
I don't
interest.
think it's ever going to happen, but it would help me out a lot. I can assure you, it would eradicate about 90% of recruiters.
We're going to have to regulate LinkedIn now.
Yes. But it becomes, there will always be another problem, another challenge that is in place. And that's where it just comes down to being interested, loving what you're doing and talking to people and having a genuine interest in people so that they feel that they're on the journey as well, rather than, have you got any jobs? No. Okay, I'll call you back in 12 months to see if you've got any jobs. So, it comes down to, you mentioned there about the ski slopes. It does come down to, well, what other value can you offer me? What else can you do? Which means that I'm going to come to you for this bit of business. And that becomes the part. You need to add value all over the place to get what you ultimately want, need, and desire.
Okay.
But it's definitely one of those you have to give a lot, and don't expect stuff back. If you expect stuff back, you're going to be a lot of heartbreak and pain.
That was my curiosity because it's very similar to our business. We refer to it as give to give. A lot of times you just need to be out there, give to give, introduce people who need to know each other. We often say one of the best things that you can do for a client is to bring them an opportunity to sell their product or good or service to someone else. And we do that a lot. A former client needs to buy XYZ type of technology. We worked with said technology in the past. Hey, we'll introduce them. Second best form of social debt is to introduce them to a candidate for a role they need to fill. That's how the business goes around. And then all of a sudden, 3 years down the road, that company will be thinking about a shift in their model and changing from a perpetual into a SaaS motion as their product has evolved. And all of a sudden they'll say, well, that person who helped us place Jane, we should call them because I think they were in this kind of business. And it's the long game. And that's the way the world works.
But you also have to be talking to them throughout that whole 3 years and giving them other insight information, because if you go quiet for it, there might be someone else who's noisy at the time that ends up again. And I'll always say largely the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil. So if someone's there is noisy, there's a competitor that's in there giving more noise at the right time, then you're in trouble. That's why you just have to be around all the time and looking to help. And like you say, introductions are critical for people, and being around and being able to give introductions, advise, let people know what other people are doing. This all helps so that when they come to actually need to spend, then you're going to be top of their list or as close to the top of their list as it can be. Great question. Like that. I've never had that type of question before. So I appreciate that. I had to think about it. Before I let you go, because we've been talking for a long time, I know you'll have your next meeting lined up. Tech spend being cut and how that's affecting new logo, retention, churn. Why was it important for you to mention tech spend being cut? Because look, I kind of say it all the time about CROs in private equity businesses, that you're asked to do an awful lot more, but they tend to pull away a lot of the armory that you had to do it, particularly from the VC world. And suddenly you need growth, but you haven't got the same sort of tech spend as you might have had before. So talk me through your thoughts on that, why you wanted to talk about it, and how sales leaders should get around it.
The reason I think it's important is because this is not a one-time thing. I mean, this is an every year thing, right? The general philosophy is more with less is the normal year in and year out. So, to me, that's the challenge that companies have to overcome. I mean, budgets are by and large not going up in most industries within most companies. And it's whether it's sales productivity and commercial spend being, scrutinized, whether it's overall technology spend, whether it's R&D spend, whether it's G&A cost. I mean, everything is under pressure. The one thing that is increasing is EBITDA. And that is the trend that everyone is looking at. And then we've got some larger macro issues with interest rates and with political tensions and other things going on. So people are trying to be very cost conscious. It's not the first time we've seen it. It definitely won't be the last time that we've seen it. I think there's a whole lot of sentiment that next year there will be a lot of companies going out to market, a lot of private to private transactions, a lot of, VC to private equity transactions. Probably the take private stuff continues, but hopefully we'll also start to see the IPO market pick back up as well. So, there's a lot of pent up demand out there. And in times of uncertainty, and earlier this year, the uncertainty index hit an all-time high. It was astronomical in April. That's when people tend to just buckle down and be very judicious in how they're spending every single dollar. So when uncertainty hits, decisions slow, spend gets more scrutinized, and it makes it harder. And typically those run in cycles. We're in one of those cycles right now where everything's under the microscope.
And what advice are you giving to businesses at the moment about how they analyze which tech they should have? Because I totally agree with it, because there's some techs that you can just switch on, and sometimes it's so cheap to have. It's like, I'll just have that and then I'll use it. And then before you know it, that tech hasn't been touched for 2 months and it's just running in the background and there's a cost associated to it. But how are you advising these leaders to really understand which tech they should have and they should be using, particularly when you're looking around go to market? There's a lot of sales enablement tools out there, and I think there's a lot of really great ones, but sometimes I'll say you do realize sales were done before sales enablement tools existed, so it can be done. But how are you advising these leaders to analyze which are the nice to haves and which are that's going to move your business forward, that's going to affect revenue, EBITDA, everything that you need, and you need to have that piece of tech?
Yeah. Nice to haves are not interesting anymore. Everything has to be business case justified, value justified, quantified. And if you are even considering a piece of tech that you can't justify through an ROI, then you should stop wasting your time, effort, and resources on even evaluating it anymore. Got to start with the business case. And then more importantly, you've got to be able to sell to the business case. So the companies who are succeeding right now are those who are able to justify the value, prove the value, demonstrate the value, and then those who stick can measure the value ongoing and show the continued return on the investment that's being made. And it sounds very cliche to make it all business case driven, but that is how tech works. And when we go through cycles, when times are very flush. People make a lot of discretionary spend decisions that they might not otherwise make if everything is being scrutinized. And in a lean cycle, value wins the day. Justified, return on investment wins the day. Nice to haves don't exist when people are looking at something in a lean time.
Just needs to take emotion out of it, because salespeople, sales leaders can sometimes be the easiest people to sell to, right? They see something, they like it, they want to do it, but you've got to take that out of it and really look at the information, the data, and what it's going to do. And at the end of the day, your cost, your spend is going to be scrutinized from the top down. So if you're going to buy it, you're going to spend it, you're going to have to talk about it, and you're going to have to own it. Tony, it's been an incredible conversation. I really appreciate you taking time out. I know there is not much time in the day to fit anything else in. So I really appreciate everything that you've done, time to have this episode put together.
James, it was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to future conversations and hearing the stories from your other guests. Got a great lineup of guests set up for this season, and I can't wait to hear what the others talk about as well.
Thank you so much.